I've worked in product innovation for 20 years, and one of the questions I get asked a lot is how do I find the right contacts? Or people come to me and say, I just can't get in with the buyers of John Lewis or Marks and Spencer's or this retailer or whoever it is. Now this video is for you. It goes through the critical ways of getting in front of the right people and finding the right people who can really open doors and help you sell your new product in volume. So keep watching. Today, I'm going to talk all about how to find the right people to buy your idea. Now, this might be about finding the right global head of new product development to do a licensing deal, or it might be about finding the contact details for a senior buyer in a high street retail chain. A lot of what we're going to talk about today in terms of the methods and the tips and tricks and things will apply across the board, no matter what route you're going down. But the key thing is this: it is really hard to build this list of people that you need to go and contact to buy your idea. You're going to have quite a list because very few people manage to get a licensing deal or an order from a buyer off their first meeting. So you're probably going to need to talk to quite a lot of different people. So the key really is to start building your list of all of these contacts early on in the process. Now, most people don't do this. They get tied up in product development and features and functions, or building their team or their marketing ideas, all the exciting stuff. But launching a startup with a new product, whatever route you go down, is actually more about selling than it is anything else. And it is not true that a good idea will sell itself. In 20 years in the industry, I have never seen an idea sell itself. I have seen a few people get lucky, but most of the time, the success stories that we talk about, the people have got good at selling and they made a very deliberate effort to sell their idea. So this lesson is critical because what we're going to do is look at how to find the right contacts, and then you're going to need to spend quite a lot of time building your contact list, ready to go and approach a lot of different people so that you can get some no's, and it doesn't really matter because you've got such a large list of people, you only need a few of them to say yes, and you're going to start to make some profit from your idea. The objectives for this lesson really are about giving you the knowledge of how to find the right contacts, inspiring you to get started on it, and giving you the information that you need to start your plan for how you are going to apply this to go and get the contacts that you need. Now, even if your plan is to sell direct to the customer, it's still worth thinking about how to find the right contacts in industry, because it may well be that you're going to look to find an international distributor further down the line to sell your product into other countries that you can't sell direct to the customer, where there's language barriers or issues with customer service. Or it may be that you try to sell direct to your end consumer and then end up deciding that actually you want to go down the retailer route later on. So whatever route you're choosing, this lesson is definitely still relevant and worth paying some attention to. The first thing that we're going to look at is the different methods that you can use to find the right people who might buy your idea. And those methods are, briefly, building the right team, LinkedIn, which is an incredibly powerful way that wasn't available probably 10 or 20 years ago that you can now use to great effect to find the right contacts to buy your idea, asking other people and getting them to share their contacts, direct calling, that only really works normally with smaller businesses, but we'll talk a bit about that as well, and then shows, which again I think are an extremely powerful way of finding the right contacts within your industry who could well want to buy your product. We're going to go through these in order, starting with building the right team. A few different options potentially for you to think about here. And the point really is that there are people out there in your industry already who have a black book of contacts. They know the buyers, they know potentially the people in the companies who you might want to talk to about doing a JV. So rather than trying to build that list from scratch, you might be better off finding the right person to work with who's spent years building up those contacts already. Here are 5 different ways that you can bring people into your team who then can do the introductions and get you in front of the right people. So the first one is a non-exec director. I've included this because a lot of startups bring in non-exec directors. The reason is they're a relatively cheap way of actually getting very high level people into your business when you could never afford to employ them. Non-exec directors will sometimes work for a stake in the business, might be kind of 1 or 2%. Sometimes they might actually be investors in the business, and then when they have invested money for a stake in the business, they may well then be prepared to give their time for free or their contacts for free because it benefits them, because their investment value will then grow. Or it could be that they're paid on something like a monthly retainer. And that can be a good option if you don't want to give up a stake in the business, and if you're not getting other investment in and all you're doing is giving up shares just to get one non-exec director in, it can end up very expensive because actually you're going to have a shareholders agreement, and you're going to have a solicitor probably in terms of sorting out the company formation, allocating the shares and all that kind of stuff, which can end up costing several £1,000s. So it may actually be cheaper just to employ that person as a non-exec director just on a monthly retainer. Now, often what you're doing is bringing in someone who's got 20, 30 years industry experience at a very high level. Maybe they're a managing director for a big company within your industry. They've recently retired, or they've taken early retirement, or even sometimes they're still employed and still working in the industry, but they're allowed under their contracts to take a couple of non-exec director roles, normally with non-competing businesses. And I found this hugely helpful in my business, and I'll go on to explain a little bit more about that in a minute. Now, the second option is to employ a consultant. Again, often consultants have a significant level of experience, but rather than taking a non-exec director role, which has certain responsibilities around it, means they sit on the board and other things around it, actually with a consultant role, they just have a single task, which is that their job really is to consult, normally in a particular area of the business. In this case, we're probably talking a sales consultant, effectively, in a sales role. And this can be anything from they are going out and doing the initial meetings or trying to set up the initial meetings for you to discuss your idea. It might be they're just doing some email introductions for you to then go and do the bulk of the work, or they're just sharing the contacts with you and then you've got to do almost like a cold approach. So there's different kind of levels here in terms of how you could work with someone on a consultancy basis. Normally this is just month by month, which means you're not actually creating a huge liability for your startup business. And if it doesn't work out, well, there's no harm done. It hasn't cost you a lot, and you're not kind of employing that person on a longer term basis. Sometimes what you can actually do is just have someone who will be paid to do introductions. There might be a particular fee for an introduction, low-level introductions that might not be worth that much to you, a lower fee potentially than if they introduce you to a very large company or to a big retailer that could do a big order, then their fee might be larger. The fee may also be on a percentage of their first order or their orders going forward. This can end up very expensive if that's a very valuable order. So just think about that and think about their fee structure. The success fee thing is quite nice. In some ways, you haven't got to find the cash to pay them up front, and you're only paying them if actually your business is then successful and is making money. But as I say, in the longer term, it can cost you a huge amount, and you can end up really resentful of the fact that 2-3 years down the line, you're still paying this person who did an introduction 10% on every order or whatever it is, and actually they've earned tens of thousands of pounds out of what really was less than half an hour's work for them. So just bear that in mind and think about how you might feel about this deal in 3 or 4 years' time if it all comes off. You could, of course, decide that actually what you're going to do is you're going to go and employ someone who is already a salesperson within that industry. So let's say, for example, you've got a product, you want to get it in with retailers. It might be that you find someone who is already employed by another brand in the industry, maybe selling something slightly different, or maybe selling a competitor's product even, and you headhunt them basically, you offer them a job, and then they're using all of their skills and all of the contacts that they've built up working in the industry, doing the same job for another brand. They're then bringing all of that and using that for you and for your product. This isn't really possible to achieve with something like a joint venture or a licensing deal, because really what you're trying to do here is get in with someone quite high up in an organization, so you're probably going to end up needing to go down a non-exec director or consultant route. But if you're looking to get in with retailers, then it may well be that actually it's sensible just to employ a salesperson whose job it is to go out and sell your product. Salespeople are normally quite highly commission driven, which keeps your costs down, but nevertheless you are committing here to a basic salary for someone, and potentially you've got to think about whether they're then going to expect a company car, expenses and everything else as well. So just look at that as a complete package and see whether actually that's something you're willing to commit to quite so early on in your startup journey. And finally here I put friends in because often what I found is that people have someone in their wider network of friends and family who initially is quite willing to help out on this side of things. They may have contacts in the industry already, or maybe they're just much more extrovert and outgoing than you are, and therefore potentially would suit a kind of role that is approaching people and finding the right people within your industry. Do be realistic about what your skill set is and whether this is actually for you or whether you need to try and bring someone else in. I've worked with plenty of clients previously who actually they've used their mum or their sister or a friend or a cousin to do the selling for them because actually that's their skill set. And that suits them much better than it does the original person who came up with the idea, who maybe is more technically focused or better on the finance side. And so just think about your skill set, and as you're building your team, don't just think about the kind of employed or consultant route. Sometimes you can find that, as I say, people within your network are more than willing to help out. Particularly in the early stages, a startup is an exciting thing to do. A lot of people are looking for something that's a bit more interesting, and I've been surprised in fact to find how many people are willing to give time and support in the early stage of a business for nothing at all. So just think about that as an option as well that might work for you. So I'd love to share a little bit more of my experiences with this to hopefully help you and inspire you on your journey. I employed a non-exec director. He's a guy called Andrew Ratcliffe. Used to work for a car seat company, and obviously when I was selling my pushchair, having someone who had run a car seat company, and actually the car seat brand had a pushchair range as well during the time that he was working in the business, and he literally knew everybody. And one of the things that was best about working with Andrew is he could rank the retailers for us. So we put together a matrix of, we want retailers who are quite large, as independent retailers go, so they're going to shift more volume. We want a retailer who's got really good online presence, because obviously kind of online sales is a big kind of growing area. We wanted retailers who paid on time. We didn't want issues with cash flow and having to chase people. And we basically gave Andrew a list of about 120 independent pushchair and nursery product retailers in general across the UK. And he was able, from his experience working this big car seat brand previously, to go through and rank those in order. And from there we had then a top 20 hit list really, which were, these are the best independent retailers for us to approach and sell our product to. And that kind of knowledge is invaluable, because what that's doing then is formulating your overall sales strategy, and it would take you years to get to a point of understanding that without that kind of industry knowledge to support. Now, we got a lot of extra with Andrew, not just his contacts in the industry. He sat on the board, he helped us with all the strategic decisions, and he really kept us focused on the cost of the product when, like a lot of entrepreneurs with new product ideas, otherwise we would have got really carried away and just kept adding feature after feature and making it better and better. But he was very good at focusing on what really mattered and keeping us focused on what really mattered as well. So I really rate working with a non-exec director, particularly one with industry experience, because I think they add a huge amount of value for what actually is a relatively low overall cost. Now, actually, I also employed a salesperson who had experience working with large accounts. She'd worked in FMCG, so things like cheese and coffee, working with the likes of Morrison's and Waitrose, but as such, she understood intimately how you deal with buyers of that kind of size organization. And again, that was invaluable. Now, she didn't have the industry experience, But I didn't need that because I'd already had that knowledge of the industry from Andrew as a non-exec director. So what I then just needed really was the experience from someone who'd worked as a salesperson working with big accounts and big retailers. We were targeting John Lewis. That was who we really wanted to be in with, as well as these top 20 independent retailers. And this lady brought the skill set to deal with the likes of John Lewis and knew how to pitch and how to get our product in with them. So that again was invaluable experience and knowledge that was brought in. It was a much bigger commitment for us as a startup than having Andrew as a non-exec director on a month-by-month arrangement, but nevertheless we felt it was worth it as the company was growing, and we managed to raise the investment to pay for that. So I just thought it was worth sharing a little bit of my experience of those type of things. And Andrew Ratcliffe happened to be good friends with the senior nursery buyer at John Lewis. So getting a meeting with her was then really easy because Andrew could just give her a call. He had her mobile number. And that type of contact otherwise probably would have taken us months to get to a point of being able to have a meeting with that senior buyer. So that saved us a load of time, and it was a really easy meeting as a result because Andrew did the introduction. He also helped us formulate the pitch, and he knew obviously what she was looking for and what John Lewis was looking for because he'd dealt with them for many years. And it gave John Lewis huge confidence dealing with us because there was Andrew sat in the room who they knew all about the nursery industry and would help us as a startup to deliver the right product and also deliver what they needed as a buying team as well. So this next section is all about how you can use LinkedIn to find the right people within your industry to approach. Now this works if you're trying to find retail buyers, this works if you're trying to find distributors, and this also works if you're trying to find the right person in a big company to do a joint venture or a licensing deal. You're just going to need to change the job titles you're looking for depending on where you're going with this. So for example, if you are going down the distributor route, then the job title you're probably looking for is owner or founder or managing director. You're looking basically right at the top of a distributor because the decisions about which products a distributor is going to stock are normally taken by the people right at the top of that. And most distributors are relatively small businesses, so you want to be going in right at the top because they're the people that can decide whether they want to stock your product. Now, if you're going down a retail route, then in a big retailer, what you're looking for is a senior buying manager or a senior buying director, or you may even have a whole load of categories. So let's say you're selling a new hand tool to the likes of Screwfix, then they may well have a whole load of category buyers. So what you've got to try and do is establish what's the category that your product's going into, and then you're looking for, ideally, the senior category buyer that suits your product. If you're dealing with a small retailer, maybe it's one or two shops, then you're really looking for the owner. No one else is going to be taking the decisions in that kind of size of organization about what products they're going to buy. They may have a buyer, but most of the time it's the owner that's taking the decision. Now, if you're looking for a license deal or a joint venture, then probably what you're looking for is the head of new product development, MPD. You might be looking for head of R&D, head of research and development. You might be looking for the product manager or the senior global product manager if it's a large multinational organization. But you're going in at that type of level and you're looking for someone who is in charge of decisions around new products and new product development. So I'll give you some more examples of potential job titles because they vary hugely really compared with, it's relatively simple in terms of the job titles in retail. It's all around buyers. It's then just a question of what category and what level of seniority that you're targeting. Now, LinkedIn is a hugely powerful tool that we are so fortunate has been developed and is now available to use. And it really is the search facility within this, which is of such huge benefit to someone like yourself who's trying to find the right contacts. Now, the search facility on the basic LinkedIn is relatively basic. You can see here, it's still possible to use it to find relevant results. And you can then approach. But what you really want to be doing is upgrading to Sales Navigator, because this gives you a much better search facility and means you can contact more people that you don't have as a second or third connection. Now you can get a free trial of Sales Navigator, and it might be worth deciding exactly what you want to do, working out all of your search terms, and then getting the free trial and using that to its absolute maximum benefit, and then cancelling it before you spend any money at all. But equally, if you find it really useful during that time, then obviously that might be something you want to continue, and you can see here what the monthly cost for that is. So I'm going to go through a couple of demos here now on the screen to show you how to use Sales Navigator to find and then contact a list of people who are relevant to your product. As I say, hugely powerful tool, and this otherwise would take hours and days maybe of research to get this kind of information if this wasn't available. Now, it's worth saying that within LinkedIn there are lots of facilities not to just message people. A lot of people go straight for that and they're desperate to try and get the right contact to come back to them. But actually you can see what your contact has been up to, you can look at what they're posting about, it gives you an idea of what they're interested in, and you can like posts, you can follow the company, you can comment potentially on some of their posts and that type of thing. And what that's doing really is starting to build a bit of a relationship with them before you just launch in with a message, and that might be worth considering using on the platform. Now, if you have something that actually could be in thousands of shops across the UK, and you're not just looking to try and find the right person in 2 or 3 companies or even 10 or 20 companies, you can actually automate a lot of the actions within LinkedIn. Now, if you want to do this, it's probably better you get in touch with me separately. I will put you in touch with the person that I use for this. But effectively what you can do is set up a series of messages. You can do these searches, you can scrape the data from these searches, and then LinkedIn will automatically work through that list of people, sending them the messages up to the maximum contact number that you can do through LinkedIn every day. And as I say, if you've got something that's broadly very popular, lots of different people you need to try and speak to, then this can be a broad brush approach. And as I say, the automation then can save you days of time and can do a lot of that for you. There is a cost associated with that. It's about €200 every month. And get in touch with me if you want the person who can set all that up for you and take you through that in more detail. So let me just talk to you a little bit about my experience with LinkedIn. This is something that we use in my design firm all the time. We have set up all the automation systems on it. So we're contacting up to 100 people every day across a variety of industries that we've worked in previously, designing new products. And we've set up and tested various different messages that we send to these people, and we automate likes of their posts and follows of their companies and all this kind of other stuff as well. And actually it works really well. I probably get something like 5 or 6 responses every week. Some of them aren't interested yet. Some of them are interested, and we've won some clients out of it quite quickly as well. And really it's then about managing these people who are warm leads but are not ready yet. And this is one of the things we'll talk about later. What you need to learn to do is not really take no for an answer. So if someone comes back and goes, this is of no interest to me, then your response doesn't have to be, oh well, never mind. It can be, sorry to hear you're not interested at the moment. Is it worth me getting back in touch with you in 6 months? Or, sorry you're not interested, is this because you're not the right person for me to be speaking to, or is this just not of interest generally to your organisation? And you're always really fishing and trying to find an in, trying to find another way, or trying to keep them at least warm so that you can go back to them at a later date. Equally, you could use it as an opportunity for feedback and say, sorry you're not interested. Is there anything that would have meant you were interested in this product, or is there anything else in this category that you're looking for at the moment that this product might fit with? But it's worth thinking about if there's another angle. You could even be using it as an opportunity to get some feedback. So someone says to you via LinkedIn or any other way, I'm not interested. You could say to them, I'm really sorry to hear that. Is there anything that would have made you interested? Is there anything I could have done better, or anything any questions I could have answered in my presentation or in my messages that would have helped you to actually be more interested in it? And sometimes you won't get a response, but sometimes you will. I had a buyer last week who said to our client, we're not interested, but she then went on to list out 4 or 5 questions she had around the product, and my client could then use that to refine their presentations. So you need to try to learn to not take no as an answer. You need to try, if you can, to cultivate them at least as a warm lead who you could go back to maybe later on. And if it is a no, at least try and get some kind of feedback out of that and try and get something positive that you can then take forward to improve your messaging or how you're presenting your product or idea. Now, asking others really is probably the best way to try and find the right contacts in your industry. Now, some people are really good at this, naturally extrovert, they talk to everyone, and other people are going to have to put a lot of effort into actually having those conversations and making that extra effort required to do something that's out of their comfort zone. But this really does work really, really well. In every industry, there are people who are open and willing to help, and you just really got to meet some of the right people and start talking to them. And they're probably not the people you want to get to. So you're very unlikely, for example, maybe you've gone to a trade show and you've met a couple of other startup entrepreneurs on their stands. They're not the buyers you want to get to. They're not the people in the companies, the big companies that you want to get a license deal from, but they're a starting point. And they're ahead of you on the journey. They've got their own contacts. And my advice really would be to be as friendly and open and have as many conversations with as many people in the industry as you possibly can, and just build some relationship with them initially before asking for what you want. And as an example of this, last week I went to a meeting with a client. It was a small manufacturer. We thought, well, they're far too small really for us. We need a license deal with someone who's going to do 10,000 products a year, not someone who maybe does 500. But we did the meeting anyway, just chatted to her about her business and how it's gone over the last couple of years during COVID and all that type of thing. But out of that, we actually learned a whole lot of information about some of the larger companies in the industry, and she really helped formulate how we should take it forward and gave us some contacts as well of the people who are in a larger organization who would be helpful, who she's worked for previously. But that would never have happened if we hadn't taken that smaller meeting that initially appeared to be with the wrong type of company, and equally that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't done that relationship building stuff first with her. It's often best to start with those smaller businesses, those entrepreneurs or startups that are a few years ahead of you but know what it's like to be in your shoes, and as I say, build a bit of a relationship and then from there start to share contacts. And you might have to share some of the contacts you've built in order to get some contacts from them as well. Now, often, obviously, it helps if they're not a competing product, but the contacts you're looking for in your industry, probably, if your idea is unique, as it probably is if you've got this far, there are probably lots of other products that aren't quite the same or in a different category, but still sit in the same industry, who would have the right contacts for you, or at least would have maybe the buyer in the right company, but in a slightly different department, who might be able to give you the contact for the buyer that you need in the right category. So it really is about meeting lots of people, having lots of conversations, and we'll talk about how you can get in front of and meet lots of these people later on in this session. Now, what I've often found really helpful actually is talking to the people who are trying to sell me something in the industry. So for example, let's say that you have developed a new toy product and you've gone to a big toy show. There will be people in that show who are trying to sell you PR services or specific marketing services, or maybe they are a particular legal supplier that specialise in working in the toy industry and contracts around toys. Maybe they're testing providers who specialise in getting toys to pass the relevant standards. Whatever it is, there will be people in that industry who are keen to sell to you. Now, you might not need their services, but what I found helpful is to talk to those people and start to build a bit of a relationship with them, because they've been in the industry a long time and they probably know some of the people you want to get in front of. So use all of those opportunities you come across where people are trying to sell you something who are in the same industry as you. Don't just view them as something you need to kind of get rid of and a distraction. They may well be able to put you in touch actually with the right people in your industry. It's also worth chatting to show organisers. So Most industries will have large trade shows. We're going to talk more about this in a minute. They'll also have consumer shows, and the show organisers know everybody, obviously, who is exhibiting at the show. So they could be really good people to talk to in terms of trying to get the right contact. And even if you're at a show, for example, and you're talking to the show organisers and saying, well, I really want to meet the right person from this company, for example, it might be that they can do the introduction then and there. Now, bear in mind, if you're attending a show like this and they are there to sell their product, they're not there necessarily to look at buying your idea. They might be slightly resentful about the fact you're taking their time, so you do need to be a little bit careful when you're meeting people at these shows who are there to sell and not to buy. But you can keep your conversation relatively short. You can suggest that really this needs to be a conversation at a different time, but would they mind just passing a business card to you so that you can contact them and arrange another time to come and see them. So just be respectful and mindful of that. But nevertheless, that can be a really good way of meeting people who you want to talk to. Most industries will also have a trade body that a lot of the companies that you want to talk to will be a member of. Talking to those trade bodies about what you're doing, who you want to speak to, can they help you at all? You'll often find those people, again, are quite helpful in terms of putting you in touch with the right people. And what you're really looking to do whenever you have any of these conversations and meet any of these people is get 2 or 3 contacts for people that you can then go and have a conversation with. Now, you might not get right straight to the person you want to get to, but at least if you can have a conversation with someone, get 2 or 3 contacts for other conversations you can have, eventually you'll be speaking to the right person who can put you in touch with the person you really want to get to. It sometimes though means a few conversations along the way. It isn't often a direct route. And again, with trade publications, they often know all the people and all the companies that you want to talk to. So it's worth, again, approaching them, just having an initial conversation saying, can you help? Is there anyone you could introduce me to? Is there anyone who can help me get in front of the senior buyer from this company? So I just share a little bit of my experience of this. So I exhibited at the Kinderjürgen nursery show over in Germany, and actually there was a whole section of small businesses from the UK exhibiting at that show. And actually a lot of those exhibitors traded contacts. That was one of the main things that they were there to do. So I would say, well, I've actually got the buyer from Argos and I can give you their details. And they said, well, that's great. I've got the buyer from Toys R Us or wherever it is, and they could then happily share that contact detail with me. Equally, we'd have chats about little independent retailers and say, oh, have you dealt with this person from X retailer in Edinburgh? And they say, oh yeah, she's a terrible person to deal with, isn't she? Or actually, that's a really great retailer there. Or you also then find little stories out and you go, well, actually, if you get in with this retailer in this region, then this other one won't want your product. And you find out all the little kind of side stories and bits of information that otherwise you just wouldn't find out about. And in the nursery industry particularly, there was loads of that. Particular retailers who, there was one you had to call by her full name, Mrs. and her surname. You couldn't call her by her first name until you really got to know her, and that was like 4 or 5 years apparently. And there were little competitive local retailers whereby you kind of had to choose between one of 3 retailers which one you wanted to get your product in, because as soon as you got it in with one of those 3, the other 2 would refuse to take it. And all that kind of information I only really got through talking to all of these other small business owners and their products. And it really is just a question of showing a bit of interest, having a general conversation, maybe grabbing them a coffee in the way into the show in the morning. And so that as you build that relationship, you then start to share information and knowledge, and you can end up getting in front of the right people and finding the right contacts that way. Now, direct calling really is quite niche. You're not going to be able to ring a large company and try and speak to their head of new product development about a joint venture. You can try it, but most times you won't get anywhere close to them. Equally, you're not going to be able to pick up the phone and speak to the senior nursery buyer at a big high street retailer. It just isn't going to happen. And equally, you're not going to be able to pick up the phone and speak to the senior buyer in a large retailer. Again, you're just not going to get through. You can give it a go if you want, but you'll probably get disappointed quite quickly. However, if you're trying to speak to a small company about maybe doing a license deal, or you're trying to speak to a small independent retailer, then often direct calling is the right way. And really, you just want to ring them up and say, I've got a new product, I think you'll be interested. Can you tell me who the right person is to speak to? Now, do be ready for them to come back and say, well, yes, you can talk to me, I'm the owner. And then obviously you need to know what you're going to say at that point. But most of the time you'll be speaking to someone else within the business who can then at least tell you who the person is. And then from there, what you really want to be doing is saying, well, that's great. What's the best way for them that I get in touch with them? Would they prefer I sent them an email, and can you share their email address? Or is there a good time to call them? Or would they prefer for you to give them my details and for them to call me back? Now that's your least good outcome. Really, you want their details so that you can get hold of them. Otherwise it just disappears into the ether and you don't hear from them. But it is important to find the way that they want to communicate on what's best for them. And we find, certainly when we do this, that actually the people much prefer it if you've asked the question, what's the best method to get hold of this person? It just feels much more respectful, and actually you're going to start the whole thing on a much better footing if you go down that route. So there is a place for direct calling, but as I say, it really only normally works with smaller businesses. I'm a huge fan of shows as a great way to meet the right people who may well buy your idea. There's two options, attending and exhibiting. If you're exhibiting, do think about the all-in cost, because there's not just the stand costs, but there's all the kind of food and transport, and every time you want something like a plug socket or a table and chairs or whatever else, you've got to pay to rent that for the time, and all those costs really do add up. But at a lot of these shows, there are buyers or people from companies who are going around looking for innovative new ideas to incorporate within their products, either by a JV or a licensing deal, or to stock in their stores. And you can meet a lot of people through these shows as an exhibitor. If you're just attending, obviously you're saving a huge amount of cost, but you will find it much harder to talk to people. The people on the stands, they spend a lot of money getting those stands. They're there to sell. They're not there to they're not there to buy from someone like yourself. So you are going to find those conversations a little bit more difficult. And obviously, if you're just attending, you're there probably for much less time, and you're not going to have the same benefit if you had a stand and buyers and things are coming up to your stand to talk to you. It is worth saying it can be hugely frustrating, even when you're exhibiting, when people don't come over to your stand and when you're not meeting the buyers that you want to meet. And you do need to make sure that you're doing your groundwork before the show itself to invite people to your stand, to make it known that you're going to be there, to try and set some meetings up beforehand. And I found really it's the work beforehand to get their meetings set up in advance, and it's the follow-up after the show that are the critical things to make that a real success for you. Now, do think globally and not just inside the UK if you're thinking about exhibiting or going to shows. Some of the best shows that I've been to have been in Germany because they've got massive exhibition spaces, far bigger than we have in the UK. Or I've been to shows over in Shanghai in China as well, which again are set up for a global audience and are much bigger events where you can meet a lot more people. I found actually I met a lot more British retailers at the German nursery show than I did at the UK one, simply because actually it was so much bigger that so many more retailers made the effort to go, and that was the one they went to every year. So do think about what are the big events in your industry, where are they located, and it may well be worth you traveling further and spending more money to get to a show that's maybe got 5, 10, 20 times the number of people coming to that show. It's worth looking at both the trade and the consumer shows, because at the consumer shows, the people who are exhibiting, if you want a license deal or a JV, they're the people you're trying to speak to often. Also at consumer shows, you can meet a lot of the other people in terms of small businesses or entrepreneurs and things who can then put you in touch with the buyers at the retailers if that's the route you're going down. Now, a little technique here: if you're trying to talk to exhibitors and you want a favour from those exhibitors, so you want a meeting to discuss your idea or you want buyer contacts, try and be there first thing or last thing. In my experience, consumer shows are busy in the middle part. The people on the stands who are exhibiting don't want to talk to someone like you who's trying to sell them something or trying to get contacts from them at that point. But the beginning at the end, they're much friendlier because generally speaking, there aren't the consumers there. There aren't queues of people to get on their stand who they want to talk to about selling what they're there to sell. So that would be my technique. Try and get in early or late if you want to speak to exhibitors at shows. If you are exhibiting, do find out about what after-show events there are. Often there are exhibitor drinks parties and that kind of thing. They are sometimes formal or informal on other people's stands, and really do make the effort to go to those, because that's when people aren't thinking about selling their product. They've let their hair down a bit more, they've finished their hard work for the day, and they're often a lot more open. And so often they do want to make good contacts within the industry and people they kind of get on with. So I've got a couple of clients who've made very good relationships with lots of other small brands within different sectors that they're in through these after-show drinks parties and things, and they all swap contacts and things, and that can really help you get in front of the people that you want to get in front of. Now, if you're attending a show or you're exhibiting and you want to get onto a big company stand, so I was at a big military show, for example, last year, military equipment show. I wanted to get onto a stand that sells big military helicopters. We were looking to license a new harness product that we thought they could use on their helicopters. And basically the whole stand is fenced off, and there's a receptionist there who wasn't about to let me onto the stand. If I didn't have a name or I didn't have a meeting, I wasn't going to get anywhere at all. But what I did do then is speak to someone else that I know who was exhibiting, who had a smaller stand, who does a different type of product. And as a result of my relationship with him, he said, that's fine. I know one of the technical guys there. Come with me. I'll get you on the stand. We can start talking to him, and then hopefully he can refer you across to the person that you need to speak to. And that worked really quite well. I ended up on the stand and having a quick chat with the person I wanted to talk to about whether they would license this product, got the business card and details for the person to then set up a subsequent meeting. So that can work quite nicely as well. It can be very intimidating, can be difficult to get onto big company stands. If you're looking for a JV or a license deal, that can be quite tricky. But what you need to try and do is cultivate some relationships with some of the other kind of brands and product owners and whatever, smaller businesses, and then hopefully they can do those introductions and get you onto those larger stands. It can also be that you have to try and set up a meeting in advance if you want to go on one of those big stands and you want to meet some of those people high up in a bigger company at a show. Try and do your groundwork beforehand and contact them beforehand and see if you can set up a meeting. The other way that often works is that we found anyway, and this is an example from a blue light show we went to last year. So this is where you've got people who are selling products into the police or the fire service or the ambulance. And we were talking to one of these receptionists who was closely guarding this stand and not letting us on or not letting us talk to anyone else higher up in the business. And she was just asking a couple of questions about the product. And we then said, well, we've been working with firefighters from the West Midlands Fire Service. We know that this is a product that they want, and they want to see it used within their equipment. And that was almost like a kind of magic phrase. And all of a sudden she turned around and said, okay, that's great. I can introduce you to the right person to talk to. He'll be back on the stand in 5 minutes or so. And the thing is, a lot of these shows, there are people who are guarding, if you like, the higher up people within the company, and they're protecting them from kind of random inventors and that type of thing who have new products. But rather than talking to these people and saying, I've got a new product idea, I'd love to discuss it with someone, start to talk about the fact that you've done your research, that it's something that their target market definitely wants. Present them with a business proposition. Don't just talk about the fact you've got a new idea, but say that you've developed a product that is a benefit to their range and to their portfolio. You've done your market research. You know that their target market wants it, because you may suddenly find that you get past then the person who's guarding the stand and you can go on to speak to the right person. So just be careful about the language and the phraseology that you use. You're trying to present a business proposition. You're not trying to talk to them about a new idea that you happen to have. I could talk all day about shows, having done them all over the world in all sorts of different industry sectors. I just thought I'd share a couple of examples. So we were at a nursery show in the UK. We had booked last minute. We got a really good price on the stand because they hadn't filled it, and for the organisers it was like it was going to be empty and they'd get no money at all, or they could do a really good deal for us and we could be there. So I think we had about 4 days to get everything together for it. It was a really bad position. It was one of the last stands, and that's what often happens. If you don't book early, you end up with a fairly naff position. And I remember just being hugely gutted that all these people were going past, they weren't stopping, that we hadn't done our pre-work, we hadn't set up all these meetings because we didn't know that we were going until the last minute, and it was fairly demoralising. And I remember seeing this guy, and he was talking to everyone, and people were stopping him, and he was constantly, all day, I could just see him in different places in the show. He was constantly talking to someone and talking to some of the independent retail buyers who I knew I wanted to talk to, but I'd really struggled to get hold of at all. And what I decided at that point was I was going to introduce myself to this guy, found out who he was, and I realised then from that conversation he was becoming a sales consultant and setting up his own business. And so I recruited him as a sales consultant, and then the next year at that same show, I was the stand that was really busy, and because he was on my stand and he knew everyone in the industry, he was dragging all these people over to the stand, having a chat with all these people, and then leading it on to talking about my product and what we were doing. And that was fantastic. But just bear in mind, if you're at a show, you're looking for the people in the industry who know everyone, who are constantly chatting to people in the industry, who are known by everyone. And then potentially you might be able to work with those people, you might be able to recruit those people on some level to support you in developing your contacts and promoting your product idea within that industry. And I remember being thrilled the following year. This guy was just bringing all these buyers to the stand. I had a better position stand anyway because I booked it in advance, and things really started to pick up for the product at that point. Let's go on now to talk a bit about tips and tricks and what you can learn from some of our previous experiences and previous client experiences as well. I think the main thing really when you're starting out is to try and turn whatever conversation you're having into 2 or 3 more contacts that you can then go and have conversations with. You're starting out, you probably don't know anyone in the industry, or maybe you know a couple of people at all, and you've got to get to a point where you know a lot more people. And the easiest way of doing that is if you have one conversation and you turn that into 2 or 3, and then you have those conversations, you turn them into 2 or 3 other conversations. Very, very quickly then, you're expanding out the number of people that you've had contact with within the industry. So initially, maybe rather than looking to get the absolute final contact that you want in the big company in the industry that you want to speak to, maybe instead you're just trying to find 2 or 3 other people that person can introduce you to. So for example, maybe you've gone to a consumer show and you found a small brand owner, you've gone early on in the day when they're not busy, you've had a bit of a chat, you've asked them about their products and their experiences in their journey, and you said to them at the end of the conversation, who else would it be good for me to have a conversation with, or would you mind introducing me to a couple of other people? And maybe that's other small brand owners. They're not the people who are ever going to buy your idea, but it's just about getting more and more contacts, and then some of those conversations will turn into the conversations that lead to the buyer or lead to the head of MPD who you do want to talk to, who is going to buy your product. As we touched on earlier, you are going to have to learn to not take even no for an answer. So if someone says to you that this isn't for us, then the question really is, okay, is it something that we can come back to maybe in 3 or 6 months? Is it something you'll bear in mind? So if you're developing new products, this might be appropriate. Is this something that I can touch base with you again on a year's time and see whether at that point it might complement your existing range or whatever else? The other thing is, we've had no's from companies for license deals for products, and then our client has found someone else within the organization, and actually it's become a yes from them, even though it was a no in a different department. So bear that in mind as well. And often these global companies don't talk to each other between their different global divisions. So for example, we've got conversations ongoing at the moment with an Australian division for a company when the UK company said no, they're not interested in the product, and the Australian division is really interested in it, and it looks like we're going to end up with a license deal there. So bear that in mind as well. Don't take no for an answer. Also, if they do say no, just use those opportunity to say, okay, is there anyone else you think I should speak to within the industry who it may be more appropriate to, or is there anything else I can provide to help you to see whether actually it might fit somewhere else within your product range, or to address the concerns that you have over it. Do look out for Meet the Buyer events, particularly in retail. These are becoming more and more common. Retailers are beginning to get the hang of the fact that actually their buyers are really busy, they're under a lot of pressure. It's very difficult sometimes for startups and the most innovative new products to get in front of those buyers, and sometimes they do Meet the Buyer events where you can basically apply, you get through hopefully the first kind of couple of stages, and then you're one of a lot of different people that the buyer's meeting in the same day. So look out for those as well. And also some companies actually on their website have a submit a new product idea section where you can literally just submit things via the website. That's sometimes worth looking out for, and that can lead to things as well. Sometimes we make this too difficult and it's just really easy to get in with a company you want to get into. They've got a section on their website for it already, or they've got an event coming up where you can meet the right people. There are various competitions sometimes in terms of gaining a prize where you get to meet the buyer. There are also some TV shows. We've had a client go on one of these and succeed in terms of getting in front of the right buyers via that route as well. So there's options there to consider. We touched on this previously, but you do really need to try and ask everyone you know. You'll be surprised sometimes who knows who and how you can actually get to the right person via your own network, sometimes in surprising ways. Do look out for that person in the industry who just happens to know everybody. Again, if they're selling into that industry and they're selling to the people that you want to speak to, they probably know all the right people for you to talk to. So just think about who is trying to sell already to the people that I want to speak to, and can they help me with their contacts? Now, you never know what a meeting might turn into, and I would say don't turn down, particularly in the early stages, any meeting. You might look at the company and go, well, I really don't think this is the right company for me, or I'm not sure this really fits with their range, or they're too small really to make a difference for what I want to do. But I would say don't turn down any of those opportunities initially. You never know what they're going to turn into. And more often than not, we've had clients come back to us and say, oh, I've just had a meeting with X company. I didn't think it was going to be helpful at all, but actually they're developing a new product and this would fit brilliantly with it. Or they actually agree that they're not the right company to take on this product, but they're going to put me in touch with this person who they used to work with, who's now working in absolutely the right company to take on the product. So just make the most of all of those opportunities. Again, just talk to as many people as possible, and then some of those people, I'm sure, will put you in the right direction for the buyers or the head of new product development that you want to talk to. Now, it is definitely worth using LinkedIn almost to stalk some of your ideal contacts. Obviously, don't stalk anyone, that would be illegal, but you can at least find out what they're doing, what they're posting on, what they're interested in. And also do look at the companies you're trying to approach. What's their wider strategy? If, for example, we were working with Mothercare a while ago before they went bankrupt. Now, one of their key things as part of their overall company strategy document was innovation. So we went in on that card and said, look, one of your 3 top priorities as a business, according to your latest kind of press release that the board has decided, you are looking at innovation. We don't think there's much innovation in your product range in this area and in this area, and we can help you through our design process to actually innovate in those areas. And that was our opening pitch, and that got us a meeting at Mothercare headquarters up in Watford. So sometimes what you've got to do is work out what the individual's interested in or what the company's priorities are, and then use that as your opening to get the meeting that you need. Now, do also remember, if all else fails, and if everything I've said today is just hugely intimidating, that there are often sales agents in the industry that you're trying to get into whose job it is to sell new products in. And therefore, you might be best off trying to find the right sales agent for you and not doing any of this at all yourself. Now, that's very difficult if you're trying to get a license deal or if you're trying to get a joint venture. There aren't very many people out there, and certainly none that I would trust or recommend, whose job it is to go and find the right contacts to do that. So if you are going down that route, you are going to have to, I'm afraid, do quite a lot of what I've talked about to try and find the right people to speak to. But if you've got a product that you want to get into a retailer, and probably if you've got a product that you want to get into a distributor, then there are often agents who will work on your behalf to do that for you. So we've reached the end of this session. Hopefully you found that useful, and you've now got more knowledge about the different methods that you can use to find the right contacts to buy your idea. Please do bear in mind what I said at the beginning. You're basically now going into a sales exercise. You need to put more time, effort and energy into selling your product, and particularly at this stage building the right contact list to sell to, than you do almost into anything else in terms of developing or protecting or manufacturing your idea. It really is a sales exercise, and therefore it's best to try and get on top of this as quickly as possible. I would start by finding out what trade shows, what consumer shows are in your industry, and start trying to find out who's selling stuff in your industry to the people that you want to speak to. And that's where you could start finding the right contacts to buy your idea.